It doesn't look like much, really. If you didn't know better, you'd think you were looking at ordinary tap water.
So what is it?
It's benzene C6H6.
C6H6? What's that?
It's a chemical formula. It's 6 carbon atoms with 6 hydrogen atoms attached. It makes a benzene ring. It's a real special molecule. You must be new around here.
You guessed that right. I heard I'm going to be working with benzene starting next week, and Joe said I need some kind of special training or something. What's the big deal?
Well, that benzene makes it possible to create all sorts of things. Plastics, dyes. Benzene is also used in some petroleum products, even in gasoline. And like other chemicals that we use, benzene can be hazardous. If it's not treated with respect.
That's why it's kept in this hood?
Well, that's part of the reason, yeah, but there's really more to it than that. Now, Joe will be able to give you a complete rundown. And you stop back here later, I'll give you a pop quiz.
Thanks, but no thanks. I'll catch you later.
Okay.
So, today's school day, huh, Joe?
You got it, Jeff. Have a seat. Hey, have you had your coffee yet this morning?
All that I can stand. So what gives with these benzene? You know, if you want to know the truth, with all those benzene signs out there, you've got me curious.
Good. There's nothing wrong with being concerned. It shows you're paying attention. The fact is, it's when people lose their concern and become complacent that we see problems start to happen. And benzene's worth being concerned about. But if you treat it with care, you'll be fine. I want to go over how you can detect benzene on the job, some of the physical and health problems it can cause, and how you can protect yourself when you work around benzene or products that contain benzene.
I'm listening.
Good. Well, for starters, areas where benzene is routinely present will be posted with signs to let you know of the hazard. You can find benzene in refinery units where it's made or used, during barge, tank, rail, and truck loading and unloading operations, in pipelines, in crude oil and condensate for some of our production operations, as well as in mixtures of other chemicals. Any containers you handle that contain benzene in concentrations which could lead to overexposure will be labeled according to government regulations. Pure benzene is a clear, colorless liquid with a pleasant, sweet odor. And odor is important when working around benzene.
Well, what could be bad about something that smells good?
Well, quite a few things, Jeff. And you can't really trust your nose for protection, because if you can smell it, the airborne concentration has already reached levels which are higher than permitted. So the best protection is know where benzene might be present before you start to work. Now, the first thing we got to do is get you over to the medical center for a physical exam, including a medical okay for use of a respirator. Now, I'll meet you back here about 11 o'clock, and then we'll go out into the plant.
Whatever you say. Let Charlie know I'm out. You know, he wanted me to give him a hand with that tester running in B unit.
Okay, I'll find someone to give him a hand. And Betty Jackson, the nurse over medical, she's expecting you.
Okay.
Well, everything's in order. I'll see you next time.
Oh, terrific. Thanks.
Okay.
Jack, how's it going? Don't get to see you much anymore.
Yeah, I'm keeping out of trouble. I just got my blood checked over with.
Any problems?
Nah, just nothing.
Take care. Mm-hmm. Betty Jackson?
Hi, you must be Mr. Davis. I had a note you'd be coming. How are you this morning?
I guess you're going to tell me, right? Joe Johnson said to say hello.
Oh, how is Joe? I haven't seen him in a couple of months. I hear he's doing well over in the training program.
Well, I've made it this far.
So far, so good, right? Well, we're going to need to take a little blood, so why don't you follow me?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Davis, roll up your sleeve.
So what's with the Dracula bit?
Well, if your work may expose you to benzene on a regular basis, we have to do a detailed blood analysis so we can be sure that your blood chemistry is normal. Then we follow that up annually so that we can detect any changes that might indicate a problem.
So why was Jack being checked? He hasn't worked out in the unit in years.
Oh, just a precaution. Anyone who used to work with benzene in concentrations any greater than 10 parts per million has to be checked annually, just so we can make sure that everything's still okay. You can fold your arm up. Next is spirometer.
A spirometer, what's that?
It checks to see how well your lungs are working.
Oh.
It says here that you may need to use a respirator. Anyone who uses a respirator needs to have this test first, and again every 3 years after that.
Okay.
So, take this,
All right.
and when I tell you to, I want you to get a good seal of your mouth around the tube and then close off your nose. And then when I say go, you're to blow hard and long, as hard as you can, as long as you can.
All righty.
Ready? Go. Go, 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 go. Come on, you can do it. Come on, that's it, go. All right.
How'd I do?
5.1, not bad. Perfectly normal. You shouldn't have any trouble with your breathing. And the next thing I need is a detailed medical history. Now, have you ever worked around benzene before?
No.
Okay. Do you smoke?
No. Well, everything checked out of medical. What's next?
Physical and health hazards. Everyone who works with benzene goes through training like this to inform them of the hazards of working with benzene and how to protect themselves. Like I said before, Jeff, information. Knowing the hazard, that's the best form of protection you have. And the best source of information on any chemical is its material safety data sheet.
Oh, yeah, the MSDS.
Remember, we've got them on file in the work area. If you have any questions about benzene or any other chemical you handle, check its MSDS. Any containers containing hazardous concentrations of benzene will be labeled, and the label is keyed to the MSDS. I'll use it to guide us through the hazards of benzene and what we can do about them. First, let's go over the physical hazards. If you're drawing a sample or any other time you're transferring benzene to a portable container, be sure to label the container with an appropriate label and use the proper personal protective equipment. Pure benzene is highly flammable. It must be stored in tightly closed containers in a cool, well-ventilated area. Obviously, smoking is out, and so are sparks and open flames when handling benzene. Smoking is only permitted in designated areas. And when transferring benzene or any flammable liquid, proper bonding and grounding procedures must be followed to avoid static sparks.
Makes sense. So what about these health hazards?
Well, it's all in the MSDS. It says here that benzene can affect your health if you inhale it, or if it comes into contact with your skin or eyes. Benzene is also harmful if you happen to swallow it.
Who would swallow benzene?
Well, no one on purpose. But it might happen if you were splashed in the face. What's more likely, if you don't follow proper precaution, is skin or eye contact, or breathing benzene vapors. People in the lab must use a vacuum bulb, fill a portion of the fluid, instead of using the mouth to suction benzene. This way, you'll avoid ingestion. When benzene comes in contact with the skin, it can be absorbed into the bloodstream and cause dizziness and loss of balance. These are short-term or acute effects. If your skin comes into repeated contact with benzene, it can dry out the natural protective oils in the skin, leading to dermatitis. Dermatitis occurs after repeated or chronic skin exposures. If benzene is splashed into the eyes, it'll sting and result in tearing and irritation. The most serious health problems known to be associated with benzene overexposure have been the result of inhaling benzene vapors. Acute overexposure to benzene may make you feel lightheaded, giddy, dizzy, and you may feel irritation in your eyes, nose, and throat. Severe overexposure can lead to a loss of consciousness and even death. Chronic overexposure may result in various blood disorders, ranging from anemia to leukemia. So you can see, you were right to be concerned.
I'll see.
That's why various limits have been established by the government to prevent overexposure from the air we breathe. The first of these is the action level, 0.5 parts per million, or ppm. If benzene is present at the action level or above, the company must implement special procedures, including special training, medical evaluations, and monitoring procedures. To give you some idea how small the action level is, if we measured all the air you breathe in an 8-hour day, it would be enough to fill over 650 beach balls 1 foot in diameter. 0.5 parts per million of benzene in air is produced by evaporating 1/2 of 1 drop of liquid benzene into all that air. So you can see that 0.5 ppm is a very small amount. Higher than the action level are permissible exposure limits, or PELs. The first of these limits is a time-weighted average, or TWA, of 1 ppm. This is the permissible level of exposure to benzene in air averaged over an 8-hour workday. The second is the short-term exposure limit, or STEL, of 5 ppm. This is the permissible level of exposure to benzene in air for any 15-minute period during the workday. Any place in the plant where the airborne concentration of benzene exceeds these limits must be posted as a regulated area. Access to these areas will be limited to authorized and trained people.
I guess I'm going to become one of those authorized people.
That's right.
So how do I make sure I won't have any problems?
Well, for starters, there's a lot the company has done to protect you from coming into contact with benzene. In some cases, other less harmful chemicals have been substituted for benzene, and various engineering controls have been implemented to prevent benzene exposure. These include isolation of benzene in pipes and covered tanks, as well as the use of special site sampling devices, ventilation to remove benzene vapors, and vapor control systems to prevent the release of vapors during filling and transfer operations. In addition to these engineering controls, the company has implemented several work practices designed to limit benzene exposure. Special maintenance procedures have been established, which include flushing and purging of vessels and lines that contain benzene. After working with benzene, be sure to wash your hands with soap and water before eating, drinking, or smoking.
Before you mentioned something about monitoring. What's that all about anyway?
Well, we take samples of the air you breathe in order to determine what hazards are present and what to do to protect you from the hazard. In some places, area monitors have been set up to monitor benzene levels on a continuous basis. But the best way to determine personal exposure levels is with one of these pump and charcoal tubes, or with an organic vapor monitor. Now, these sample your breathing zone to measure the airborne concentration of benzene. You wear either one or the other on the job. When the measurement is complete, you'll be notified of the results. If tests show exposure above the PELs, you'll be told within 15 working days what the company is doing to reduce exposure.
How do they do that? Reduce exposures, I mean.
Well, normally it's done by using engineering controls we talked about earlier. But while engineering controls are being implemented, when repairs or maintenance are necessary, in emergencies, or when benzene is used less than 30 days a year, you may need to wear a respirator.
That's why I had the lung test.
You got it. To wear a respirator, you need medical's approval. Then you'll be fitted with a respirator, and the fit will be tested. The respirator will be equipped with special cartridges designed for benzene or organic vapors. The respirator cartridges should be replaced at the beginning of each shift and discarded at the end of the shift. If you detect any odor of hydrocarbon or benzene or any change in breathing resistance while wearing the respirator, leave the area immediately and replace the respirator's cartridges. If you can't wear a negative pressure respirator, you have the option of wearing a powered air purifying respirator. Depending on the concentration of benzene, you may need to use an atmosphere supplying respirator.
Sounds like you got my lungs covered. What about the rest of me? Do we need gloves and stuff?
You bet. If there's a chance your skin could come into contact with benzene, you should be wearing approved gloves. Here's a pair. If you're transferring benzene, you'll need a face shield. And you should wear other chemical protective equipment that's appropriate to the job, like an apron or rubber boots.
I guess if there was a spill, we'd need extra protection.
Yeah, that's true. And there are some special procedures to follow, too. First, alert others to the spill. Then remove or turn off all ignition sources. Don protective equipment if necessary. Then stop the release if possible. Next, contain the spilled benzene with a suitable material. Dry sand or earth will work. When the cleanup is complete, be sure to ventilate and stay out of the area until the exposure level is below the PEL. Finally, make sure you dispose of the contaminated materials properly. Be sure you follow the government's requirements for disposing of hazardous waste. If you accidentally get benzene in your eyes, flush them immediately with water for at least 5 minutes, 15 if you can. If irritation persists, you should see a doctor. If you get benzene on your skin, remove contaminated clothing and wash with a lot of soap and water immediately. Don't rewear contaminated clothing. Let it dry completely before reusing. Finally, if you or anyone you're working with starts acting unusual, if you feel giddy and sleepy, you may be experiencing an overexposure to benzene. Get to fresh air right away. If someone goes down, don respiratory protection and get them to fresh air. If necessary, and if you've been trained, start artificial respiration. In a confined space situation, follow proper confined space rescue procedures. Wait for a trained standby before attempting a rescue. If you have an emergency and excessive amounts of benzene vapors may have been inhaled, a urine test is required at the end of the workday to check for benzene levels. If these levels are high, additional blood testing will be required.
I guess benzene's nothing to fool about.
You know it, but if you work smart, you'll be just fine. Any questions, just let me know. Now, let's get going. We need to get a sample from the benzene unit over to the QC lab. Charlie will show you the ropes.
Well, we spend most of the day out at the plant, you know, and Joe told me about the physical and health hazards and how it can enter our bodies, protection, and emergencies. I'll say one thing, that man can sure talk up a storm.
You bet. It sounds like he covered it all, though. Hey, look, I'll tell you what, why don't I get my gloves and we'll get started on that sample.
Yeah, stuff can be pretty nasty.
You know, I think Joe did a pretty good job with you.
Well, you know what they say, better safe than sorry.